So if you own a business as a sole proprietorship, is it possible to switch that business over to a corporation? Well, this is a question that comes up pretty regularly for me. And the answer to the question is yes, you can change a sole proprietorship to a corporation, but it's not super simple. It's not like you just send an email to the business registry and ask them to switch it. There is quite a bit of administrative work that goes into doing this. And in some cases, this can make a lot of sense. And then in other cases, maybe you're going the opposite direction, where you started out as a corporation and you want to switch to a sole proprietorship. It can be done. Again, it's just going to take some administrative work. And one nice thing is you don't need to stop operations of the business while you're doing this. Your customers probably aren't even going to notice that you switch legal structures. In most cases, customers don't even know what type of legal structure their favorite businesses operate under anyways. But now when it comes to that administrative work that I'm talking about, what does that actually include? Well, if you're currently operating a sole proprietorship business and you have a business name registered to yourself as a human entity, and you want the corporation to keep that name, then in most cases, you need to cancel that name registration so that you can reapply for that business name to then use it to incorporate. And so the business name can stay the same if you do that. But of course, with a corporation, you're going to need to add LTD, Inc., or Corp at the end when you go through the formal incorporation process. Now, when it comes to your municipal business license, you'll probably want to let them know that the business name has changed, just if you add that corporate legal ending to it. When it comes to sales tax accounts like PST for provincial sales tax or GST for goods and services taxes, which is a federal tax in Canada. As a sole proprietorship, those tax accounts are tied to you, the human legal entity. So if you switch over to a corporation, then typically you close down those accounts and you open new ones tied to the corporation. Now, the same thing with a business bank account. If you have a business bank account for your sole proprietorship business, you're switching it over to a corporation, you'll have to open a new corporate bank account for the corporation, even if you're still the owner and even if the business name stays the same, because it's tied to a separate legal entity, which is what you're doing when you create a corporation. You're creating a separate legal entity that is separate from you, the human entity. Now, another important thing to be aware of with a corporation, if you're switching your business over to that, is that a corporation has a separate tax return. So as a sole proprietor, you're just claiming your business income, your business expenses on your personal tax return. But with a corporation, it has a completely separate tax return where you report the business financials on. Now, when it comes to other things like insurance, again, if you have an insurance policy or if you have a lease, those are going to be tied to you, the human entity, as a sole proprietorship. But if you're switching over to a corporation, then you might want to have that lease switched over to the corporation. And with the insurance policy, maybe you don't necessarily need a new policy, but good to talk to your insurance provider just to make sure that that policy can be switched over to the corporation and removed from you, the sole proprietorship, the human entity behind the initial business before switching. And then when it comes to payroll, if you have employees as a sole proprietorship and you're keeping those employees, then of course you want to keep them on payroll. But with the payroll account, you'll have to open a new one that's tied to the new corporate entity because again, it is a separate legal entity. And I can't speak for all jurisdictions, but in Canada, we're given one federal business number per legal entity. So all of that, GST and PST as a sole proprietorship, that's going to be tied to you with one federal business number. But once you incorporate, you'll get a new federal business number and the payroll account and the GST will need to be registered to that new federal business number. So once everything is sorted out and all those new accounts are opened and tied to the corporate entity, then typically you can close down all the accounts that were tied to you, the human entity. So sales tax accounts, the bank account, things like that, if you're not going to be using them anymore because you're no longer conducting business as a sole proprietorship. Now, when it comes to something like a website or a Google business profile, this doesn't matter as much. You don't really need to change much. Maybe you are updating your name because it now has LTD at the end, but otherwise, you don't really need to change much with things like that. So hopefully this video was useful. If so, please click like and feel free to come check out my YouTube channel here, where I currently have almost 300 videos that cover business management and business startup topics.